Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If copy system in Naruto. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 411, Kisame almost gets wrecked. Deep in a dense forest, Obito and Kisame leap through the trees, rapidly closing in on the Eight Tails location. Kisame, be careful this time, Obito cautioned Kisame. Oh? Even you aren't confident? Kisame looked at Obito in surprise. Kisame had no doubts about Obito's identity. He still believed Obito was Madara Uchiha. You should know, the Eight Tails is in Shin Uzumaki's hands. Do you think it'll be easy? Obito reminded Kisame. Isn't Shin Uzumaki also a member of the Akatsuki? Can't you just ask him to hand over the Eight Tails? Or is it that even you, Madara, don't have the power to make Shin Uzumaki hand it over? Kisame's barrage of questions made Obito slightly annoyed. Don't ask questions you shouldn't. In the end, Obito didn't scold Kisame and focused on their journey. Kisame also fell silent. He wasn't a talkative person, he was a man of action. Obito and Kisame were unaware that their movements were being completely observed by Shin, who was flying high above them. Should I make things a bit more difficult for them? Shin mused to himself. Nah, let's just watch for now. Capturing the Eight Tails is already difficult enough. The third Raikage puppet was currently controlled by the Eight Tails. This meant Obito and Kisame were about to face the combined might of the third Raikage and the Eight Tails. Even Obito Uchiha might not be able to handle that. Shin followed them, purely for entertainment. Soon, Obito and Kisame found the Eight Tails, or rather, the third Raikage puppet Shin had created. Kisame looked at Obito with a puzzled expression. Weren't we here to capture the Eight Tails? That looks like the third Raikage. But that's not right either. Isn't the third Raikage already dead? How is he here? The third Raikage is Shin Uzumaki's puppet. The Eight Tails is sealed within it, Obito explained to Kisame. White Zetsu had provided him with this intel. So that's how it is. Kisame's expression turned slightly peculiar. The third Raikage turned into a puppet? Didn't Kumogakure care? Or did they not know? Did Kumogakure not know? Of course, they knew. But knowing and being able to do something about it were two different things. Knowing was useless, they couldn't handle the situation. So now we're likely facing the third Raikage plus the Eight Tails. A battle glint flickered in Kisame's eyes. He had long heard of the third Raikage's strength, now he could finally witness it. You go first, Obito instructed Kisame. He had no intention of attacking himself. He wanted Kisame to test the waters first. That was Obito's little scheme. Kisame didn't know. He thought Madara Uchiha simply disdained to act himself. So, without hesitation, he drew the Samahata from his back. Though bizarre in appearance, the Samahata was incredibly powerful. At least a third of Kisame's strength came from this sword. Kisame without Samahata was a completely different fighter. Of course, even without it, Kisame was still formidable. Who are you? The Eight Tails' deep voice rumbled from the puppet, addressing Kisame and Obito. It had noticed them following and had deliberately led them here. The ones who came to capture you. Kisame wasn't one for small talk. He preferred action over words. He struck first, slashing his massive blade towards the Eight Tails. When Samahata struck an enemy, it could absorb their chakra, its most distinctive feature. However, Samahata wasn't just an inanimate object, it was a living being. It only recognized those it favored. Kisame was someone Samahata favored. But if someone appeared whom Samahata liked even more, it would abandon Kisame without hesitation. Samahata was particularly fond of the Eight Tails chakra. After striking the third Reikage puppet and absorbing the Eight Tails' chakra, Samahata rebelled. It attacked Kisame, turning against its wielder. Kisame's expression darkened. What's wrong with Samahata? Obito was perplexed. If he didn't know Kisame better, he might have thought Kisame was staging this whole thing. Kisame Hashigaki, however, understood Samahata well. He decisively discarded the sword. A disobedient Samahata was nothing but a burden. No matter how strong a weapon, if it didn't obey, it was useless. If you're looking for a fight, I'll grant you one. The Eight Tails controlled the third Reikage puppet, charging towards Kisame. A deafening clap of thunder, and the third Reikage appeared behind Kisame, unleashing a punch. The speed was so incredible that Kisame couldn't react. He was sent flying dozens of meters, his left shoulder completely shattered. That's fast. Obito was shocked. Even he might not have been able to dodge that, if he hadn't used Kamui. Not bad. It seems the Eight Tails can draw out considerable power controlling the third Reikage's body. Shin was also observing from above. Kisame had been injured in the initial exchange. If this continued, Kisame might very well die here. No joke. The Eight Tails plus the third Reikage puppet, especially with Kisame having lost Samahata's assistance, could easily overwhelm Kisame. Lightning Release Chakra mode had already been activated. Its extreme speed was second only to the Flying Thunder God technique. In the blink of an eye, it reached the airborne Kisame and unleashed another punch. Kisame's pupils constricted to pinpricks. He couldn't block this punch. Kisame felt a mortal crisis. In his desperation, Kisame saw the Samahata that had abandoned him. He immediately pulled it over, using it as a shield. Boom! Samahata was obliterated by the third Reikage's punch, shattering into pieces. Even with Samahata absorbing most of the impact, Kisame was still severely injured. He coughed up blood, and several new wounds appeared on his body from Samahata's own spikes. Kisame's injuries were critical. The Eight Tails didn't let up, controlling the third Reikage puppet to strike again, this punch carrying no less force than the previous one. Seeing this, Obito couldn't just watch anymore. He quickly intervened, saving Kisame. Using Kamui's intangibility, he managed to rescue Kisame. Kisame gasped for breath. If Obito had been a moment later, he would have been killed by that lightning-clad fist. Chapter 412, Can't Let Anyone See This Humiliation. Kisame was lucky. If Obito hadn't acted, he'd be dead, Shin remarked, watching the scene unfold. Shin observed Kisame being rescued, somewhat admiring Kisame's luck. It truly was quite good. Thanks. Kisame thanked Obito. He had almost lost his life just now. Though not afraid of dying, he didn't want to die like that. Looks like this will be difficult. Obito ignored Kisame's thanks, his expression extremely grave. The Eight Tails chakra, combined with the third Reikage's speed and strength, was a formidable opponent. Crucially, this opponent's defense was also formidable. It had shattered Samahata with a single punch, yet seemed unharmed itself. Hell Stab, Four-Finger Nukite. The figure moved like lightning, its attack clearly aimed at Obito. However, when the attack struck Obito, it passed right through him, not harming him in the slightest. Obito was constantly in his Kamui intangible state, existing in another dimension. No attack could affect him. This was the power of intangibility. This dojutsu was quite broken, almost unbeatable in some respects, though it still had many weaknesses. But those weaknesses were only apparent when Obito used it. In Shin's hands, this intangibility was almost unbeatable. Shin's ocular power was immense, so the Kamui he copied seemed to have evolved. After several consecutive attacks failed to hit Obito, the Eight Tails, not being an idiot, realized Obito possessed spacetime ninjutsu. Since it couldn't deal with this masked man, it would target the previously injured Kisame. Water Style, Great Shark Bullet Technique. Kisame, though severely injured, had no trouble using ninjutsu. A shark-shaped water bullet shot towards the third Reikage puppet. The third Reikage puppet didn't dodge. Having fought the third Raikage many times, it knew the puppet's durability intimately. So, it stood there, taking the attack head-on, making no attempt to defend. The puppet's body withstood the water-style attack completely unscathed. An attack of this level truly couldn't harm the third Raikage. After all, the third Raikage also bore the title of strongest shield. Whether it was well-deserved or not, his physical strength was undeniable. Water style, great waterfall technique. Seeing his previous ninjutsu attack had no effect, Kisame used water style again, this time unleashing an A-rank ninjutsu. With Kisame's terrifying chakra reserves, his great waterfall technique was comparable to a tsunami, crashed towards the third Raikage puppet. Tailed Beast Ball. The 8 tails, of course, wouldn't just take hits without retaliating. A tailed beast ball shot out, blasting the water wave apart. The force of the explosion sent the impacted Kisame flying. As for Obito, he was naturally unharmed. Injuring Obito wasn't an easy feat. The Kamui Intangibility Dojutsu was truly shameless. The 8 tails' tailed beast ball attack still had no effect. Is that really a puppet? Kisame asked Obito after climbing to his feet and wiping the blood from his mouth. Could a puppet created by Shin Uzumaki possess such immense power? Are you sure Shin Uzumaki isn't controlling it right now? Kisame's suspicion was shared by Obito. Obito was also wondering if Shin Uzumaki was controlling it. In reality, they were overthinking it. Although Shin was watching the show, he hadn't intervened. It was the 8 tails controlling the puppet. If Shin had been controlling it, Kisame would be dead by now, and Obito wouldn't be faring much better. Don't think Kamui is unbeatable. Obito's Kamui had many flaws. With Shin's understanding of Kamui, finding a weakness in defeating Obito would be too easy. Retreat, Obito suddenly said to Kisame. Kisame looked at him with confusion. Are we giving up on capturing the 8 tails? You leave first. I'll capture the 8 tails. Obito told Kisame. Giving up? Of course not. But Obito wanted to send Kisame away. It wasn't because Obito was planning some ultimate move, but because Obito wasn't confident he could succeed. What if he failed to capture the 8 tails and Kisame witnessed it? That would be too embarrassing. Humiliating scenes absolutely could not be seen by others. All right. Kisame agreed immediately. He had great faith in Madara Uchiha. Capturing a mere 8 tails shouldn't be a problem. He hadn't seen the previous battle where he was severely injured, while Madara Uchiha hadn't suffered a scratch. Kisame then retreated without hesitation, leaving only the 8 tails controlled third Raikage puppet and Obito Uchiha. Shin found this scene rather amusing. Being clever, Shin had already roughly guessed Obito's thoughts. Let's have some fun, shall we, Obito? Shin smiled faintly. His smile spelled doom for Obito Uchiha. Shin ocular power connected to the third Raikage puppet, instantly taking control. Although Shin had handed control of the third Raikage puppet to the 8 tails long ago, since it was a puppet Shin created, he could control it at any time. After Shin took control of the third Raikage puppet, its aura changed slightly, but Obito Uchiha apparently didn't notice. Sealing technique, spatial lock. This was a technique Shin had developed specifically to seal spacetime ninjutsu. It was perfect for dealing with Obito Uchiha, effectively sealing his Kamui intangibility. And what would happen if Obito Uchiha's Kamui intangibility was sealed? Obito Uchiha's strength would be reduced by at least half, if not more. This wasn't an exaggeration. Most of Obito Uchiha's strength actually relied on Kamui intangibility, at least before he became the 10 tails Jinchuriki. As for after he became the 10 tails Jinchuriki, that was a different matter. Right now, there wasn't even a hint of the 10 tails. What's going on? Obito was somewhat panicked. He discovered his Kamui had lost its effect. This was Obito's strongest ability, the one he relied on for survival. Now that it was ineffective, Obito, though appearing calm on the surface, was panicking internally. He almost turned and fled. Alas, it was too late. Even if Obito wanted to turn and flee, he had no chance. By Payam. Obito's jaw suffered a heavy blow. An uppercut to the jaw sent Obito flying. Only after feeling the pain and realizing he was airborne did Obito react. Ha! Obito wondered, confused. The difference in strength before and after was too great. The puppet hadn't seemed this powerful just moments ago. It wasn't that it wasn't strong before. It was strong. But now, it was as if it were a different person controlling it. Before he could think further, Obito Uchiha was attacked again. An axe kick slammed Obito down from the sky. Even then, it wasn't over. A lightning-clad fist smashed towards Obito Uchiha's head, sending him flying dozens of meters again, crashing through several trees, his mask shattering. Chapter 413, Considerate Compensation. Shin looked at the battered and near-lifeless Obito sprawled on the ground, feeling a twinge of disappointment. Is Obito Uchiha this weak? He'd received Hashirama's cells, he should be more durable. Shin had barely started warming up, and Obito was already down. If Obito knew those relentless attacks were just a warm-up, he'd probably cough up blood. Obito was indeed in a sorry state. His mask was completely shattered, his clothes tattered. His skin was charred black from the lightning, his hair styled into an afro, and his consciousness was fading. Still alive? Shin asked, descending from the sky. Obito's eyes flickered open. Seeing Shin, and then glancing at the third Reikage puppet beside Shin, his eyes filled with intense hatred. I knew it. I knew it was you controlling the third Reikage. Obito glared at Shin with loathing, as if he wanted to devour him. His hatred for Shin was bone deep now. Considering the third Reikage's sudden change in behavior, and now seeing Shin Uzumaki, it was clear Shin had been pulling the strings. Obito, I was just testing your strength. It turns out you're a bit disappointing. Shin shook his head, a look of feigned disappointment on his face. With strength like that, how can you fulfill Madara Uchiha's grand plan? I think you need more training. Obito sneered, not believing a single word Shin said. Regardless of why Shin had beaten him, Obito had already etched this incident deep into his memory. Shin wasn't bothered by Obito's resentment. He had never considered Obito a friend anyway. Besides, Shin knew that in Obito's eyes, he was already an enemy. So, Shin felt quite satisfied having the third Reikage puppet thrash him. You don't look convinced. It's alright, Obito. I can give you another chance. How about another round? Shin asked Obito with a slight smile. Obito, who had been filled with immense hatred for Shin, froze. Another round? Does Shin Uzumaki really want to kill me? Relax. I don't intend to kill you. You don't need to be so nervous, Shin reassured Obito. But could Obito truly relax? He wouldn't believe a word from Shin. He had no trust in Shin Uzumaki, not even the slightest bit, especially after being brutally beaten to near death. He wanted to use Kamui to escape, but the space was sealed. Obito's Kamui was useless, he could only remain here. Shin Uzumaki, what exactly do you want? Aren't you supposed to hand over the 8 tails? Obito asked Shin, his tone laced with anger, though Shin simply ignored it. The 8 tails is just a tool. It's useless to me. It's not that I don't want to hand it over, you're just too weak to handle it. Even without Shin's intervention, Obito would have struggled to capture the 8 tails, it was practically impossible for him. The 8 tails, hearing Shin's words, felt a sense of unease. What does he mean? Is Shin Uzumaki planning to sell me out? It had grown accustomed to its days of freedom. Though nominally under Shin Uzumaki's control, Shin hadn't actually controlled it. Are the good days over? The 8 tails couldn't hold back. After hesitating for a long moment, it actually tried to flee. Turning around, it controlled the third Reikage's body, activated lightning release chakra mode, and bolted. Attacking Shin Uzumaki? The 8 tails hadn't even considered it. Attacking would mean certain death. Run! Hopefully, I can escape to a place Shin Uzumaki can't find. Then I'll hide for 100 years before coming out again. Tails, you've gotten bold, haven't you? Running away now? Shin didn't turn around, but how could he not know the Tails was fleeing? A moment later, the Tails obediently trotted back. Still trying to run? Don't you know you're under my control? Shin glanced at the completely subdued the Tails, then looked at Obito Uchiha. Take the Tails. Consider it compensation. Shin had never intended to keep the Tails anyway. It was useless to him, just a tool and not even a particularly useful one. Obito Uchiha remained silent. Even if Shin Uzumaki handed him the 8 tails, Obito still hated him. Of course, Shin knew this, but he didn't care about Obito Uchiha's hatred. Long after Shin departed, White Zetsu appeared. Obito, what happened to you? White Zetsu asked Obito Uchiha. White Zetsu, don't tell me you don't know what happened. Obito's voice was icy, startling White Zetsu. White Zetsu wanted to scream internally. You were bullied by Shin Uzumaki, and now you're taking it out on me? Why don't you go settle the score with Shin Uzumaki if you're so tough? Get me out of here. Obito ordered White Zetsu. What about this? White Zetsu couldn't help but point at the third Raikage puppet. The 8 tails was still sealed inside. What puzzled White Zetsu was why it wasn't moving. But White Zetsu had confirmed it wouldn't move before daring to come out. Otherwise, it wouldn't have risked appearing. Obito Uchiha naturally knew what was going on. Shin Uzumaki must have done something. After thinking for a moment, Obito absorbed the third Raikage into the Kamui dimension. After Shin left, Obito's Kamui was usable again. After absorbing the third Raikage, Obito used Kamui to teleport away, leaving White Zetsu bewildered. White Zetsu felt some disdain for Obito. It believed Obito's earlier display of near-death weakness was just an act, out of fear of being beaten up by Shin Uzumaki again. However, White Zetsu was truly mistaken this time. Obito was severely injured. He was now looking for a place to recuperate. Chapter 414, Watching the Show and Getting Dragged In. Little girl, why are you throwing a tantrum at me? I didn't do anything to you. Shin returned to the land of whirlpools and saw Hanabi glaring at him with a cold face, leaving him utterly bewildered. He racked his brain but couldn't recall bullying Hanabi in the past few days. Could it be because he didn't bully her that she's angry? Perhaps she's a masochist. Shin nodded to himself. Don't worry, little girl. I'll bully you often from now on. Shin patted Hanabi's head. Hanabi clearly didn't know what Shin was thinking. But hearing Shin say he would bully her often made her face darken even more. Moreover, Hanabi felt she had grown up. Being called little girl by Shin still made her feel a bit dissatisfied. Seeing Hanabi get even angrier, Shin couldn't help but shake his head. Why did you suddenly go out? Hanabi huffed, hands on her hips, questioning Shin. Bomb! Hanabi, I don't need to report my whereabouts to you. Shin rapped Hanabi on the head with his knuckles, then walked past her and into the house. Wah! He bullied me again. Big sister, the big meanie bullied me. Hanabi ran off crying to find Hinata. Is she really crying? Shin couldn't help but glance back. Seeing Hanabi sneakily peeking back at him, Shin knew it was mostly fake crying. Besides, Shin hadn't used much force earlier, it wouldn't have hurt Hanabi. Forget it. I'm not going to bother with this inexplicably moody little girl. Shin walked into the house. Why isn't anyone asking where I went this time? Shin asked Tsunade and the others, somewhat surprised. Shin had expected Kushina, Tsunade, and the others to definitely ask where he'd been. He hadn't expected them not to ask at all. TCH. What's the point? You never tell the truth anyway, Tsunade said, glancing at Shin with a light scoff. Yeah, even if you were out cheating on us, we can't stop you. Makoto shrugged, looking utterly helpless. Shin sat down beside Makoto and said exasperatedly, if I was cheating, that'd be one thing. But I wasn't. I wouldn't hide it if I was. Oh, So you want to be open about it? Quite the Casanova, aren't you? Makoto said, looking at Shin with interest. Makoto, are you trying to start something? Shin raised an eyebrow, then pulled Makoto over, staring at her seriously. Lying in Shin's embrace, Makoto blushed slightly as Shin stared at her. It wasn't that Makoto was a shy person, but there were other people watching. Kushina, Tsunade, Konan, Meitarumi, everyone except Hinata, Karen, and Hanabi, who weren't present, was here, watching the show. Shin, don't hesitate. Hurry up and discipline Makoto. I'll cheer for you. Kushina shouted enthusiastically. Makoto, being held by Shin, shot Kushina a deep look. I'll remember this, Kushina. I hope you don't fall into my hands in the future. As for the sisterly bond between them, it was just a superficial friendship, very fragile. Even more fragile than plastic, it would break with a single touch. Shin, I think you should sort out Kushina, that loudmouth. She's always yelling and causing trouble. Makoto leaned close to Shin's ear, her breath like orchids as she spoke. Is that so? Shin looked at Makoto with a slight smile, a smile that made Makoto's heart flutter. Actually, I have a suggestion. How about you sort out both of them at once? Meitarumi, completely enjoying the drama, wasn't about to let things calm down. The bigger the commotion, the better. She even hoped it would escalate further, it would be a great show. After Meitarumi spoke, Kushina and Makoto exchanged a look, then immediately formed a united front. Shin, could you let me go for a moment? I have some personal business to attend to, Makoto asked Shin softly. Shin glanced at Meitarumi, then nodded with a smile. After Shin released Makoto, she and Kushina advanced towards Meitarumi. What are you two doing? Ganging up on me? Let me tell you, I'm not afraid of you. Meitarumi said, leaning back warily on the sofa. Honestly, like me and Konan, just watching the show quietly would have been fine. You just had to open your mouth. Now look, you've become the show. Tsunade said with schadenfreude. Meitarumi looked at Tsunade with a frustrated expression. Good luck. Konan gave Meitarumi a look of sympathy but had no intention of rescuing her. Shin, are you just going to sit there and watch? Meitarumi didn't expect Tsunade or Konan to help her. She'd be grateful if they didn't add to the chaos. Sorry. After much thought, I've decided to just watch the show. Shin shrugged, looking like he didn't want to get involved. Humph. The promise I made to you earlier, it's off now. Meitarumi huffed angrily. Don't. Kushina, Makoto, give me some face. Let me off this once. Shin heard this and knew he couldn't stay out of it, even if he wanted to. Letting her off is impossible. Whatever Mei promised you, Makoto and I will also promise. Kushina said to Shin, holding Meitarumi's hands. Shin's eyes lit up, a hesitant look on his face. Should he save Mei? Kushina and Makoto together, that was double the pleasure. Meitarumi alone couldn't compare. Sorry, Mei. Rest in peace. Shin turned his head away dramatically. Meitarumi was furious. That bastard had no loyalty. Wait. Just as Meitarumi was about to say something, Makoto suddenly covered her mouth, preventing her from saying anything that might turn the tables. Gag her first. As expected of Makoto, so smart. Kushina gave Makoto a thumbs up, then they both dealt with Meitarumi. 10 minutes later, Meitarumi's eyes were vacant, her clothes somewhat disheveled, revealing glimpses of skin. Shin couldn't help but sneak a few peeks. But after a few glances, Shin thought, why am I sneaking peeks? I can just look openly. Alright, his sneaking peeks turned into openly staring at Meitarumi. Stop staring at me. Meitarumi shot Shin an annoyed glare, clearly resentful towards him. That shameless jerk. And Kushina, to agree to anything without even knowing what she had promised Shin. You'll regret this. Chapter 415. Anyway, I have no shame. Meitarumi straightened her clothes and looked at Kushina and Makoto with a haughty expression. showing no sign of her earlier discomfiture. Kushina and Makoto looked at Mei Terumi, puzzled. Why was Mei Terumi acting so arrogant after they had just disciplined her? Did her brain break? Kushina asked, genuinely concerned. Your brain is the one that's broken. Mei Terumi shot Kushina an annoyed glare, then switched to a look of gloating amusement as she faced Kushina and Makoto. Hee hee, you two are in for some bad luck now. I hope you don't regret it. Although Mei Terumi said she hoped they wouldn't regret it, her expression clearly showed she was eager to see Kushina and Makoto's regret. Tsunade and Konan, observing from the sidelines, were also curious. Did Mei Terumi have some kind of trump card? Considering Mei Terumi's confident demeanor, it seemed likely. Their curiosity was piqued. You're bluffing, aren't you? Kushina scoffed dismissively. You'll find out soon enough whether I'm bluffing or not, Mei Terumi said with a wicked smile. Remember earlier, when I was begging Shin for help, I used a condition to get him to assist me? You two said you'd agree to whatever I promised. Mei Terumi grinned at them, making Kushina and Makoto's hearts sink. They instinctively looked at Shin, a bad feeling creeping over them. They knew Shin too well. Shin, what is it? Makoto couldn't help but ask Shin. Shin chuckled lightly and waved his hand. It's nothing, really. Just a promise to serve me a little. Oh, is that all? That's easy. Kushina immediately relaxed, relieved. Mei Terumi was clearly just trying to scare them. However, Makoto wasn't as optimistic as Kushina. She felt it definitely wouldn't be that simple. Knowing Shin, it would never be that simple. There's more to it, isn't there? Makoto looked at Shin. Ahem, that's right. As expected of Makoto, she guessed it right away. Much smarter than Kushina. Shin gave Makoto a thumbs up. Kushina gritted her teeth at Shin's comment. She wanted to bite him to vent her frustration. Being told Makoto was smarter than her naturally made Kushina a bit unhappy. Then tell us, Shin, Makoto said to Shin, the uneasy feeling in her heart growing stronger. You want to know? Fine. Shin glanced at Mei Terumi, who was now too embarrassed to meet his gaze. It's to serve me as a personal maid for a day each. And I've prepared a handbook with specific instructions. Shin took out a manual and placed it in front of the women. I'm going out for a bit. Konan, after a glance at the manual, immediately blushed and left the room, too embarrassed to stay any longer. The contents were simply too much for her. Wow, kinky. Tsunade scanned the faces of Mei Terumi, Kushina, and Makoto, then also turned and left. It wasn't her business, so Tsunade was quite at ease, happy to watch the show. But she'd leave for now. Even watching a show required timing. She didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. Shin, you big jerk. I'll kill you. Kushina's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She also shot Mei Terumi a glare. She couldn't believe Mei Terumi would agree to this. Alright, at this moment, Mei Terumi also felt her face burning with shame. But it wasn't that she had willingly agreed, she had lost a bet to Shin and had to accept the terms. This doesn't seem to concern me anymore, so I'll be leaving now. Mei Terumi glanced at Kushina and Makoto with a bit of schadenfreude, then prepared to leave. She was afraid of further retaliation from the embarrassed and enraged Kushina and Makoto, so she planned to make a run for it. However, Mei Terumi was too slow. Just as she moved, Shin had already grabbed her. Wait a minute, Mei. This doesn't mean I'm letting you off the hook, Shin said with a grin. What? Mei Terumi froze for a moment, then glared angrily at Shin. Shin was unfazed by her glare. Anyway, he had no shame. Kushina and Makoto exchanged a look. They knew that even if they wanted to back out now, Shin wouldn't let them. So, they might as well drag Mei Terumi down with them. After all, this whole thing started because of her. How could they let Mei Terumi escape? Mei, you're not going anywhere. Kushina and Makoto flanked Mei Terumi, holding her in place. Mei Terumi glared angrily at Shin for a while but was helpless. It seemed she had to compromise. She felt she had suffered a huge loss. She'd been disciplined by Kushina and Makoto, and she thought she could escape. If she had, it would have been worth it. But alas, Shin had no shame. In the end, Mei Terumi reluctantly agreed. Shin nodded with satisfaction, as if he could already see his happy life tomorrow. Stop grinning like that, or you'll regret it. Mei Terumi, seeing Shin still smiling, pounced on him, pulling at his cheeks. Shin didn't mind. He had gotten his way, and it was a great deal. So now he didn't care if Mei Terumi pinched his face. Seeing Mei Terumi venting her anger, Kushina and Makoto didn't spare Shin either. Actually, I'm doing this for your own good, Shin coughed lightly. I'll punch you for your own good, how about that? Kushina asked Shin, not holding back. Shin was instantly speechless and chose to remain silent. After a long while, Tsunade and Konan returned, along with Karen, Hinata, and Hanabi. Are you done with your discussion? Tsunade asked curiously. She wondered what they had talked about after she and Konan left. Had they actually agreed? She was so curious she was considering sneaking a peek tomorrow morning. The thought flashed through her mind. Tsunade decided to get up early the next morning and see what was going on. Kushina, Makoto, and Mei Terumi glanced strangely at Tsunade and Konan. They shouldn't be the only ones suffering, should they? They might as well drag Tsunade and Konan into this as well. That way, no one could laugh at anyone else. Initially, it was Kushina and Mei Terumi who proposed it. Makoto had been against it at first. But later, Makoto was persuaded by Kushina and Mei Terumi. She silently apologized to Tsunade and Konan, then started discussing how to trick them. Shin had no objections to their discussion. This was a great thing for him. He was the one benefiting, only a fool would stop them. Chapter 416, Akatsuki attacks Konoha. Shin's life in the land of whirlpools was one even gods would envy. Tsunade and Konan eventually fell into the trap, tricked by Kushina and the others into Shin's room to offer him morning comfort. And that little minx Karen actually tried a night raid on him. If Kushina hadn't interrupted, Shin probably would have eaten Karen. After all, meat delivered to his doorstep. Shin wouldn't become a monk and refuse. Unfortunately, Kushina interrupted. Both Shin and Karen felt it was a pity. But Shin wasn't in a hurry. There would always be a second time after the first. One day, Shin left the land of whirlpools and headed towards the land of fire, towards Konoha. According to intel from White Zetsu, the 6 tails and 7 tails had also been captured. The 8 tails had already been handed over by Shin. Now, tailed beasts 1 through 8 had been successfully sealed. Only the 9 tails remained. And the 9 tails had, for some reason, returned to Konoha. After Itachi Uchiha let it escape, Shin didn't know if the 9 tails had gone mad, but it had actually returned to Konoha. If this intel hadn't come from White Zetsu, who wouldn't deceive him, Shin would have thought White Zetsu was spouting nonsense. Shin understood the 9 tails' hatred for Konoha. Logically, there was absolutely no way it would return to Konoha. Yet, the 9 tails had done just that. This baffled Shin. Regardless, Pain had already decided to go to Konoha to capture the 9 tails, and the other Akatsuki members would go too. This time, it was a full-scale deployment. Only the 9 tails remained. So, Nagato chose to be cautious, leading all Akatsuki members to capture the 9 tails. Konoha is really in for it this time. Shin didn't think Konoha had the ability to resist. Honestly, Nagato alone was difficult to deal with, let alone the rest of the Akatsuki. Except for Itachi Uchiha, the Akatsuki was still at full strength. Haiden, Kakuzu, Sasori, Deidara, Kisame, and Tobi, Obito. Their combined strength rivaled that of a multi-village alliance. When Shin arrived outside Konoha, the 6 Paths of Pain and the other Akatsuki members were already there. Can't wait to slaughter those Konoha bastards. I'm so excited. Haiden shouldered his scythe, his eyes filled with fanaticism. If he could sacrifice everyone in Konoha to Lord Jashin would definitely be pleased. Haiden was getting a bit conceited. Though his immortality was impressive, Haiden's actual strength was at the bottom tier of the Akatsuki. His immortality wasn't comparable to Kagaya Otsutsuki's. Haiden's was more like pseudo-immortality. If a fire-release jutsu turned him to ash, could he still revive? Impossible. Once turned to ash, Haiden would be well and truly dead. So, dealing with Haiden was actually very easy. Deidara, for example, could blow Haiden to smithereens with his clay bombs. Even if he could survive being blown to bits, without Kakuzu, being alive was worse than being dead. Don't get careless, Pain said, glancing at the Akatsuki members with a warning tone. Compared to the Nagato of the original story, the current Nagato wasn't as arrogant, likely because of Shin, who was hundreds of times stronger than him. Though Nagato issued a warning, some, like Haiden and Deidara, paid it no mind, looking down on Konoha. White Zetsu, the Ninetales chakra isn't in Konoha. Shin glanced at White Zetsu. Just now, Shin had used Kagura Mind's Eye to scan Konoha and hadn't found the Ninetales. Shin-sama, the Ninetales seems to have been voluntarily sealed back into Naruto Uzumaki. And Naruto Uzumaki isn't in Konoha right now. But I believe if we attack Konoha, he will definitely return, White Zetsu quickly explained to Shin. White Zetsu. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Pain asked White Zetsu, his tone unfriendly. He hadn't known this information. Leader, Naruto Uzumaki only recently left. I just received the intel, White Zetsu quickly explained, not daring to hide anything from the unfriendly Pain. Pain gave White Zetsu a deep look, seemingly accepting its explanation, and said nothing further. Regardless of whether Naruto Uzumaki was in Konoha or not, as long as they attacked Konoha, they weren't afraid of Konoha not handing over the Ninetales Jinchuriki. Shin-sama, actually, I'm very curious. Naruto Uzumaki should have had the Ninetales extracted by you once. How did he survive? White Zetsu asked Shin curiously. After White Zetsu asked this question, the others, intentionally or unintentionally, looked towards Shin. Clearly, they also wanted to know the answer. Shin glanced at White Zetsu but ignored its question. Since Shin didn't speak, White Zetsu didn't ask further, afraid of angering Shin. Leader, how should we enter Konoha? Sasori asked Pain. Attacking Konoha was the most important thing right now. Sasori didn't underestimate Konoha. Only a fool would. In previous shinobi world wars, Konoha had always emerged victorious. Though Kumogakure's military strength was well known, Konoha had always been the #1 hidden village. This title was earned through battle. Even though Konoha had suffered many disasters and seemed weaker now, they still needed to be cautious. We charge in. Pain said to Sasori. Leading so many people, all of whom were exceptionally strong, even Haiden, with his immortality, wasn't someone an elite jonin could easily deal with. That's what I like to hear. Deidara was very excited. He disliked sneaking around. Since they were here, they should make a grand entrance. Sasori, I've heard you single-handedly destroyed a small nation. Care to give us a demonstration? Kakuzu asked Sasori. That nation was filled with civilians. Not a single ninja. Sasori said flatly. If it were Konoha, Sasori certainly wouldn't claim to be able to destroy it. But causing some trouble for Konoha? He felt he could manage that. Let's go. Pain walked at the front, all 6 paths of Pain assembled, and entered Konoha through the main gate. Deidara and the others followed behind Pain. Konoha is doomed. I wonder if they can withstand this. Shin was particularly curious if Konoha could survive this assault without being destroyed. It felt like unless a miracle happened, Konoha was truly finished. Obito, how are your injuries recovering? Shin didn't dwell on it, turning his gaze to Obito Uchiha, who was lingering at the back. Chapter 417, A Teacher-Student Reunion. When Shin asked about his injuries, Obito felt a surge of anger. Enough time had passed that his recovery, aided by the transplanted first Hokage cells, was complete. But seeing Shin, he felt phantom pains where he'd been struck. Obito hated Shin with a passion. Even though Shin hadn't directly attacked him, he had controlled the third Raikage puppet. Obito obviously blamed Shin. "No need for your concern." Obito stormed off. He was afraid he'd lose control and attack Shin. Obito, naturally impulsive, had only recently become more composed as a behind-the-scenes mastermind. But his composure was fragile. If provoked, he couldn't control his anger. "TSK, I was just showing some concern, and you're not even grateful." Shin used the Flying Thunder God technique to teleport directly into Konoha, landing on the Hokage Rock. From this vantage point, he could see the entire village. With his 9-tomo Rinna Tensigen, he could see an ant from dozens of kilometers away, with a 360-degree field of vision. Looking down, he saw the Akatsuki had already infiltrated. The two gatekeepers, Izumo Kamizuki and Kotetsu Hagane, were already dead. In the original story, they had survived. But now, they were gone. It was understandable. With the entire Akatsuki entering through the main gate, they would have needed Kage-level strength to survive. They were, at best, Tokubetsu Jonin, or perhaps Elite Chunin. Death was inevitable. The Akatsuki had stormed in openly, with no intention of being subtle. They were causing a massive commotion. Sasori used his performance of 100 puppets, controlling 100 puppets to kill anyone in sight. He even brought out his trump card, the third Kazekage puppet. Deidara created clay birds, soaring through the sky and dropping clay bombs on the village and air force of one. And the animal path of the 6 paths of pain summoned countless powerful beasts, wreaking havoc throughout Konoha. News of the attack quickly reached the current Hokage, Jiraiya. He immediately left his office. "Quick! All ninja, with me. We'll confront the enemy. And have the genin evacuate the villagers." Jiraiya issued his orders swiftly. In this situation, they had to fight the enemy while trying to save as many villagers as possible. Perhaps because Konoha had faced so many disasters, the villagers were quite adept at self-preservation. Upon sensing trouble, they immediately headed for the shelters. Their cooperation made the evacuation proceed smoothly. But that was a minor concern. The biggest threat was the Akatsuki. Jiraiya looked at the powerful Akatsuki members, his expression grim. Besides Zetsu, who wasn't a combatant, everyone was here. Actually, Zetsu wasn't entirely a non-combatant. White Zetsu had countless clones, and Black Zetsu's abilities could even kill 6 paths Madara. Could he be underestimated? Yahiko? Looking at the Deva path, Jiraiya was momentarily stunned. He recognized him. Even though Yahiko was grown, even though it had been nearly 20 years since they last met, Jiraiya still recognized his former student. "Jiraiya-sensei, long time no see." A cold, emotionless voice came from Pain's mouth. "You're. As you can see, I am the leader of the Akatsuki. Jiraiya-sensei, I suggest you hand over the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki." Pain's gaze towards Jiraiya was complex, but he quickly suppressed his emotions. A teacher-student reunion, yet Nagato felt nothing. After Yahiko's death, Nagato's only goal was world peace. Besides, Nagato already harbored hatred for Konoha. His parents had been killed by Konoha ninja. And Yahiko's death also involved Konoha ninja. Nagato's hatred for Konoha was bone deep. His hatred for Konoha was as immense as Obito's hatred for Shin. Why? Jiraiya's eyes filled with sorrow. He never thought their reunion would be as enemies. Shinra Tensei. Without answering, Nagato controlled Pain, unleashing a Shinra Tensei at Jiraiya. "Leader, we're still here." Haiden couldn't help but shout. "Idiot." Kakuzu cursed Haiden. He had already moved away from Pain. Only an idiot like Haiden would stand so close. After all this time, did he still not know the leader's abilities? Standing so close to the leader was just asking for trouble. Kakuzu and the others were smart, they knew Pain's attacks were indiscriminate, so they had already distanced themselves. Only Haydn, the fool, remained beside the leader. Ow, ow, ow. It hurt so much. Haydn screamed. The Shinra Tensei had hit him as well. Pain wouldn't hold back just because Haydn was there, especially not when he was in a bad mood. Fortunately, Haydn was immortal. Even if he was hit, he wouldn't die. Jiraiya was also sent flying, but he had been prepared. Though injured, it wasn't serious. It seems there's no turning back. Yahiko, I won't let you destroy Konoha, Jiraiya said firmly. Yahiko? Jiraiya-sensei, don't you know Yahiko is already dead? Hearing this, Jiraiya was stunned. Yahiko is dead? Then, this is Nagato. Seeing the Rinnegan, Jiraiya confirmed his identity. It was indeed Nagato. Then what about Yahiko? Jiraiya didn't understand what had happened. Why had Nagato become the leader of the Akatsuki? Why was Yahiko dead? Jiraiya felt a pang of regret. He regretted not keeping in touch with them. Right, he remembered Yahiko sending him a letter once, saying he had formed an organization. Was that the Akatsuki? I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to you. But today, I must stop you. Jiraiya got up from the ground, looking at Pain with a grave expression. Stop me? No one can stop me from capturing the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Hand him over, and I'll spare Konoha further destruction, Pain said calmly. If possible, Pain didn't want to kill Jiraiya. But if Jiraiya insisted on standing in his way, even if he was his former teacher, he would kill him without hesitation. So many years had passed, their bond had long since faded. Chapter 418, Do you think anyone can just mess around? Summoning Jutsu. Jiraiya bit his thumb and performed the summoning jutsu, bringing forth the entire Toad family from Mount Mayaboku. Gamabunta, Gamaken, Gamahiro, and Gamabunta's sons, Gamakichi and Gamatatsu. Even the little ones were summoned to assist. Of course, Fukasaku and Shima, the two sage toads, were also there. Little Jiraiya, why did you summon all of us? I was making dinner for the kids. Shima asked Jiraiya unhappily. Honey, look at Konoha's situation. Something serious is happening. Fukasaku said to Shima. Sages, Konoha is facing an unprecedented crisis. I need your help, Jiraiya said earnestly to Fukasaku and Shima. Since little Jiraiya is in trouble, we won't just stand by. But let Gamatatsu and Gamakichi go back. They're too weak for this. Shima said to Jiraiya. All right. I never intended for them to fight anyway. Jiraiya called over Gamatatsu and Gamakichi, telling them to return to Mount Mayaboku and keep an eye on Naruto, not letting him run wild. They absolutely could not let Naruto return to Konoha. Naruto was currently at Mount Mayaboku, learning Sage Mode. Jiraiya had sent him there. We understand. Gamatatsu and Gamakichi immediately left, returning to Mount Mayaboku. Jiraiya's gaze fell on the 6 paths of pain. Surrounded, he felt immense pressure. Hiruzen was killed by his own student. What about you, Jiraiya? Shin stood on the Hokage rock, looking down at Jiraiya below. The plot had changed. Jiraiya might die, or he might not. Who knew the outcome? Tisk, Danzo, that coward, didn't even show up. Shin's gaze swept the area, but there was no sign of Danzo, not even a single root member. Danzo always claimed to love Konoha, but where was that love now? Shin despised his hypocrisy. A selfish man, yet he insisted on labeling himself a patriot. He was just greedy for the Hokage position. The fight has begun. Shin's eyes were fixed on Jiraiya and the 6 paths of pain. Jiraiya's combat strength was not weak, especially with the assistance of the 2 Sage Toads. In Sage Mode, Jiraiya was practically unmatched among Kage-level shinobi. The boost from Sage Mode was immense. However, Nagato's strength was at least Super Kage level, unleashing that level of power was no problem for him. In a fight, Nagato was undoubtedly stronger. But in terms of combat experience, Jiraiya was far more seasoned. Nagato had limited battle experience. Jiraiya, on the other hand, had fought countless battles, big and small. Nagato couldn't compare. So, Shin was particularly looking forward to their fight. Is Nagato getting cocky? Shin observed closely. He saw Nagato just watching as Jiraiya entered Sage Mode, not even trying to stop him. After entering Sage Mode, Jiraiya's strength would increase by more than just a little. Sage Mode was basically a cheat. Nagato was a bit arrogant. He felt that even with Jiraiya at full power, it wouldn't matter. Nagato didn't care. There was also a bit of respect for Jiraiya, his final respect. Let him use his full strength and die gloriously. It was also a nod to their past teacher-student relationship. Regardless of the reason, in Shin's view, Nagato's actions were clearly foolish. He doesn't even have my strength, yet he dares to mess around? Shin scoffed. Did Nagato think anyone could pull that off? He should know better. Sage Art, Needle Jizo. Jiraiya's hair hardened like needles and shot towards the 6 paths of pain. Shin wanted to make a comment about Jiraiya's potential for baldness, but he knew Jiraiya's hair would regenerate. Shinra Tensei. This kind of wide-area attack was blocked by Shinra Tensei. All of Jiraiya's attacks were repelled by the repulsive force. Jiraiya wasn't surprised. He had expected this. The Akatsuki's leader wasn't easily defeated, especially since he was Jiraiya's own student. Speaking of teaching students, Jiraiya's teaching ability was probably the best in the shinobi world. None of Jiraiya's students were weak. If Yahiko hadn't died early, he would have achieved great things. But his personality doomed him. Sage Art, Giant Rasengan. Jiraiya used immense Sage Art chakra to form a giant Rasengan, dozens of times larger than a normal Rasengan, and slammed it towards the 6 paths of pain. Blocking technique absorption seal. The Preta path stepped forward, intending to absorb this powerful ninjutsu. And it did, but after absorbing it, it unfortunately turned into a stone frog. Jiraiya's attack was infused with Sage Art chakra, not ordinary chakra. Without Sage Mode, absorbing Sage Art chakra had this result. In the initial exchange, the Preta path was defeated. Defeating one Preta path didn't make Jiraiya happy. He could see who was the strongest. Actually, the Preta path's ability was very strong, but if it encountered Sage Art, there was nothing to be done. Even 6 paths Madara, as a 10-tails Jinchuriki, could be injured by Sage Art, let alone Preta path. After defeating the Preta path, Jiraiya instantly appeared behind the Naraka path, kicking it. In Sage Mode, his strength and speed increased dozens of times. A large hole was kicked into the Naraka path's body. Of course, this wasn't important. The Naraka path was just a puppet, it didn't affect its movements. Sage Art, Great Flame Bullet. Jiraiya didn't let up. After kicking the Naraka path away, he immediately followed up with a Great Flame Bullet, incinerating it completely. By a stroke of luck, Jiraiya had defeated the Naraka path. This was fortunate for Jiraiya. The Naraka path's ability was to summon the King of Hell and repair the other 6 paths of pain. If it hadn't been destroyed, real trouble would have awaited Jiraiya. Chapter 419, The Return of the 8 Gates Formation. Jiraiya managed to take down 2 of the pains, but it couldn't be said that he had the upper hand. Initially, Nagato had underestimated Jiraiya. Now, taking him seriously, he controlled the remaining 4 pains, completely suppressing Jiraiya. The Asura path handled close combat, the human path sought opportunities to extract Jiraiya's soul, and the animal path summoned a relentless stream of beasts to attack. The Deva path remained in reserve, ready to intervene if Jiraiya gained an advantage. While Jiraiya and Pain fought, the other Akatsuki members weren't idle. They launched a fierce assault on the Konoha ninja. Kisame, even without his Samahata, unleashed a devastating water-style jutsu that was like a natural disaster. It took more than 10 jonin working together just to block him. Elsewhere, Haiden, wielding his scythe, madly pursued Kakashi Hatake. "Stand still, you coward!" Haiden roared at Kakashi, his frustration boiling over. If he could just catch Kakashi, he'd slice him in two. Unfortunately for Haiden, he couldn't match Kakashi's speed. Though Heiden's taijutsu was decent, he wasn't particularly agile. Kakashi, on the other hand, aside from his limited chakra, had few weaknesses. Looks like I have to use Kamui. Kakashi activated his Mangekyo Sharingan with a grave expression. He knew about Heiden's abilities, which was why he'd been avoiding a direct confrontation. Konoha's investigation into the Akatsuki had been thorough. They knew about all the members, including Heiden's immortality. That was why Kakashi was so cautious. Ha ha ha. Finally stopped running. Now die, you fool. Haiden laughed wildly. Pride comes before a fall. Heiden's triumphant laughter was cut short as his upper body vanished, his lower half collapsing to the ground. Kakashi clutched his eye, a trail of blood seeping from it. He had just used Kamui, twisting space to sever Heiden's upper body and transport it to the Kamui dimension. Obito will probably find Heiden's upper half when he uses Kamui. Haiden likely wouldn't die, but who knew how Obito would deal with him? He'd probably just let Haiden starve to death. Even with Heiden's supposed immortality, without food, he would likely die. Even if he didn't starve, Obito would surely find a way to finish him off. Phew. Kakashi took a deep breath, then headed towards Kakuzu. The most troublesome Akatsuki members for Konoha were Deidara and Sasori. Not because they were stronger than the others, but because their destructive capabilities were immense. Deidara, from the sky, rained down various clay bombs, destroying Konoha's buildings. Sasori was also formidable, his 100 puppets causing just as much destruction as Deidara. Boom! Jiraiya was sent flying, spitting blood. He struggled to his feet, looking at the Deva path with horror. While he had been focused on the other pains, he had left himself open. The Deva path had seized the opportunity, hitting him with a close-range Shinra Tensei. However, in order to heavily injure Jiraiya, the other pains were also destroyed. They were destroyed by Pain himself. Shinra Tensei was an indiscriminate attack, allies were also within its range. It could only be said that Pain lacked control. Little Jiraiya, how are you? Fukasaku and Shima asked Jiraiya with concern. I'm fine for now. Jiraiya said, struggling to stand. He couldn't fall now. He was the soul of the Konoha ninja. If he fell, their morale would crumble. Jiraiya-sensei, it's all over. The Deva path floated in the air, looking down at Jiraiya, as if preparing for a final, devastating attack. Is Pain going to nuke Konoha? Shin watched the posturing Pain from above. Feel pain, think about pain, accept pain, no pain. Those who do not know pain can never understand true peace. Just as Pain was about to unleash Super Shinra Tensei, a monstrous surge of chakra interrupted him. What's this? Shin, who had been enjoying the show, showed a flicker of surprise, his gaze drawn to the source of the powerful chakra eruption. What an incredible willpower! Shin's eyes showed a hint of admiration. He was familiar with this chakra, it belonged to Might Guy. After his battle with Shin, Guy had been left crippled. Shin had spared his life out of admiration. Shin had thought Guy would never be able to use the 8 inner gates again, yet here he was, opening the 8th gate once more. This willpower, even Shin was impressed. Guy, is that you? Kakashi, struggling against Kakuzu, looked towards the Konoha hospital. Hi-ya! Evening elephant! A roar echoed through Konoha. A continuous air cannon, shaped like an elephant's foot, struck the Deva path, who had been preparing his ultimate attack in the sky. Instantly, the Deva path vanished, not even a corpse remaining. Guy-sensei. Rock Lee knelt on the ground, tears streaming down his face as he watched Might Guy, whose speed distorted space itself. He had already been lucky to survive once. Using the 8 gates formation again was a certain death sentence. Unless another miracle occurred. But miracles rarely happen twice. Besides, Guy surviving before wasn't a miracle, Shin had spared his life. Otherwise, Guy would have died long ago. What is this power? Sasori was stunned. But he didn't have time to be stunned for long. Guy's fist shattered his Hiriko puppet, destroying both the puppet and the core of his true body within. Sasori, who had lived a little longer this time, was finally dead. Then, Kisame Hashigaki, who was near Sasori, exploded into a mist of blood. This sudden turn of events stunned the entire Akatsuki. They even forgot to attack. Even Obito Uchiha, watching with wide eyes, was shocked by Guy's attack. Isn't that Might Guy? Though they weren't in the same class, they were in the same grade. Was Might Guy this strong? This couldn't be described as just strong. It was sheer annihilation. The Deva path hadn't even had time to react before being obliterated. Chapter 420, Nagato's Rampage. The Destruction of Konoha. After killing Kisame Hashigaki, Guy didn't attack again. It wasn't that he didn't want to, he was already dead. Yes, from the moment he killed Sasori and swung his fist at Kisame, Guy was already dead. In other words, Guy's death actually preceded Kisame's. The force of his punch, after his death, was what killed Kisame. Opening the 8 inner gates had already crippled Guy's body. This time, opening the 8th gate, he only lasted 3 seconds before his body gave out and he died. From the moment Guy used the 8 gates formation to his final death, only 3 seconds passed. But in those 3 seconds, he had eliminated Pain, Kisame, and Sasori. If he had lasted another 3 seconds, the other Akatsuki members, except perhaps Obito, would have all died there. No, Shin would have been fine. Technically, Shin was also a member of the Akatsuki. Sigh, he still died. Shin shook his head with a sigh. Honestly, even if someone was dead, Shin could revive them. Hagoromo Otsutsuki had been able to revive Naruto and Sasuke. Shin, naturally, had that ability too, and without using the Rinne rebirth technique. But Shin wouldn't revive Might Guy again. Saving him once was enough. Now that Guy was dead, perhaps it was his destiny. Well, actually, according to the original story, Guy wouldn't have died. But since Shin came to this world, the world had to follow the changes he brought. If I'm not mistaken, Nagato should be heading over now. Shin smiled faintly and continued watching the show from the Hokage Rock. The good part wasn't over yet. Pain had been obliterated, not even a speck of dust remaining, but Nagato wasn't dead. And Nagato would definitely come. Nagato valued Yahiko too much. Now that Yahiko's body was gone, Shin believes Nagato would go berserk. Sure enough, not long after, Nagato stormed over from outside Konoha, his entire being radiating a violent aura. You're Nagato? Jiraiya wiped the blood from his mouth, looking at the approaching Nagato, barely recognizing him. He hadn't expected Nagato to become like this. He remembered the once introverted but handsome Nagato. How had he turned into this skeletal, demonic figure? Looking at Nagato now, he truly resembled a demon crawled out of hell. His life force had been drained, leaving him emaciated. Combined with his long time hiding in dark places, his skin was unnaturally pale. With his ferocious expression, he was truly terrifying, no different from a demon. Who was that just now? Nagato asked Jiraiya fiercely. Jiraiya looked at the ferocious Nagato. He knew Nagato was asking about Guy, the one who destroyed Pain. But Jiraiya didn't intend to tell him. If he did, even if Guy was already dead, Nagato would definitely desecrate his body. Nagato, I don't know why you've become like this, but I hope you can come to your senses. Jiraiya said to Nagato earnestly. In Jiraiya's heart, Nagato wasn't a bad person, nor was he suited to be one. Something must have happened to make him this way. Jiraiya vaguely guessed it had something to do with Yahiko's death. Since you won't talk, then you can be destroyed along with Konoha. Nagato looked at Jiraiya coldly, then unhesitatingly used Super Shinra Tensei. He no longer cared about anything in Konoha, not even the Akatsuki members. Yahiko's body was destroyed, Konoha had to pay. With Nagato at the center, a destructive repulsive force flattened Konoha's buildings in an instant. Countless people died. Chibaku Tensei. After flattening Konoha with Super Shinra Tensei, Nagato didn't stop. He immediately used Chibaku Tensei. The rubble of Konoha was quickly drawn towards a gravitational sphere in the sky, including the corpses of Konoha ninja, forming a small planet. Not a large planet, maybe only about a dozen kilometers in diameter, but its deterrent force was immense. Compared to the moon, it was indeed not very large. But to the survivors of Konoha, this was the sword of Damocles, ready to destroy them at any moment. Nagato. Jiraiya stood up in pain. Jiraiya hadn't died, and he had resisted the gravitational pull of Chibaku Tensei. But looking at the planet, dozens of kilometers in size, in front of him, Jiraiya was terrified. If it fell, the villagers who had taken refuge behind the Hokage rock would also die. Konoha would cease to exist. The ground of Konoha had been scraped clean, countless people dead. Nagato killed more people this time than I did in the Shinobi World War. Shin couldn't help but remark. Those who hadn't reached the shelters were dead. Not even ninja could withstand that attack, let alone civilians. Konoha, this time, could be said to be wiped off the map. Unless Nagato, like in the original story, revived everyone he had killed. But that was impossible. In the original story, it was a bit absurd. Nagato didn't have the ability to revive so many people. Though reviving someone shortly after death consumed less energy, how many people had died? Including civilians, it was no exaggeration to say at least tens of thousands. Even the Sage of Six Paths couldn't revive all of them. Sages, you should go back, Jiraiya said to Fukasaku and Shima. Little Jiraiya, you should go too. You can still save your life with the reverse summoning technique, Shima said to Jiraiya. No. I will live and die with Konoha. Jiraiya closed his eyes. He couldn't live with the shame of Konoha being destroyed during his reign. The once great Konoha was gone just like that. He had no face to live on. He might as well die here. Nagato controlled Chibaku Tensei, bringing it crashing down on Konoha, as if to completely annihilate everything. Actually, besides the villagers and ninja still in the shelters, there was nothing left of Konoha. Has Nagato lost his mind? Obito's face was grim. He held an unconscious person in his hand. It was Kakashi Hatake. If Obito hadn't saved him, Kakashi would have died in the earlier Super Shinra Tensei. Obito didn't know why, but when he saw Kakashi in danger, he had subconsciously saved him. Even though he hated Kakashi, he still saved him. Perhaps Kakashi was Obito's true love, and Rin no Era was just an accident. That wraps up this part of What If Copy System in Naruto. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.